You know, some stories from history are just so weird, you'd swear they were made up. Well, today we're diving into one of the absolute strangest, and honestly, one of the most terrifying events that ever actually happened.
So let's set the scene. We're in Strasbourg. It's July 1518, and things are tense. The city is just reeling from famine and disease. People are on edge. But seriously, nobody, and I mean nobody, could have seen what was coming next.
It all started so simply. A single woman steps out into a street. There's no music, nothing. And she just starts to dance. Twirling and swaying, all by herself, in total silence, right there on the cobblestones.
You can imagine her neighbors, right? Just watching, totally bewildered. Hours go by, then a whole day, then another, and she's still dancing. She literally can't stop. Her body is just trapped in this non-stop rhythm. And right there, the huge question that defines this whole bizarre story is staring everyone in the face.
So, let's get into it. Who exactly was this first woman, and what in the world was going on with her?
Okay, so her name was Frau Trofea. And get this, she danced for nearly a week straight. 6 full days. Her husband, city officials, they all pleaded with her to stop, but she couldn't. It was like she was a puppet. She danced until she literally collapsed. And then, as soon as she had an ounce of strength back, she'd get up and start all over again.
Now this is where a really strange event turns into a full-blown crisis, because this fever, it started to spread. In just 1 week, 34 other people were out there with her. They were all caught by the exact same bizarre, unstoppable need to dance.
And it just kept growing. By the end of the month, that number had exploded to around 400 people. Can you just picture it? The streets filled with this eerie, silent chaos of hundreds of people just dancing endlessly.
And we have to be clear here. This was not some quirky, harmless thing. It was absolutely deadly. At its worst, up to 15 people a day were dying. Just dying from heart attacks, strokes, or simply from their bodies giving out completely.
The counts from the time are just chilling. They describe people sweating, their feet literally bleeding, their faces just twisted in exhaustion and pain, but they couldn't stop. They were prisoners in their own bodies.
Okay, so the city authorities are panicking, right? They've got to do something. But their big idea, based on the, let's say, questionable medical science of the 16th century, was about to make things so much worse.
So they bring in the doctors, and the diagnosis they come up with is hot blood. See, back then they had this idea of the 4 humors in the body, and if one was out of whack, you got sick. They figured everyone's blood was literally overheating, making them act crazy. And so their logical solution was, you just gotta let them burn it out.
And how do you burn out a dancing fever? Well, obviously, with more dancing. I'm not kidding. They actually built public stages, hired musicians to play music, and even brought in professional dancers to, keep the party going. The idea was to force everyone to dance out the fever.
And, surprise, surprise, it was a complete disaster. It didn't cure a single person. Instead, all these stages and music, it just made the whole thing look like a legitimate festival. It basically gave everyone permission to join in, and the plague spread like wildfire.
So, finally realizing they messed up, the city leaders did a total 180. They banned all music, all public dancing. The people who were still afflicted were gathered up and taken to a shrine for Saint Vitus, who, by the way, was the saint people believed could cause a dancing curse. They prayed, they sought penance, and then, just like that, by September, it was over. The dancing just stopped, as mysteriously as it began.
So the city is quiet again, but you have to imagine the people just looking at each other thinking, what in the world just happened here? And that question has fascinated historians and scientists for the last 500 years. So what could it have been? A genuine curse? Was there some kind of poison in the food supply? Or was this something deeper? Something happening inside their own minds?
All right, so there are 2 big scientific theories on the table. First, you've got ergot poisoning. This is a fungus that grows on damp rye, the kind of grain they'd use for bread, and it can cause spasms and hallucinations. Sounds plausible, right? But here's the problem. Ergot poisoning usually makes people seize up, not perform coordinated dancing for days. So that brings us to the theory most experts lean on today, mass psychogenic illness. It's a mouthful, but it basically means an illness of the mind that becomes physical, spreading through a whole community under extreme stress. And when you look at the conditions in Strasbourg at the time, this theory makes a whole lot of sense. These people weren't just stressed, they were living through an absolute nightmare. We're talking severe famine, diseases like smallpox everywhere, and just soul-crushing poverty. On top of all that real-world misery, they had this powerful shared belief that a saint, Saint Vitus, could literally curse you to dance yourself to death. It was the perfect storm.
And here's a really key piece of the puzzle. This wasn't a one-off event. The Strasbourg plague was the biggest and the deadliest, for sure, but there had been other, smaller outbreaks of dancing mania in that same area for more than 100 years. So this wasn't some new, unheard-of thing. It was a known and deeply feared possibility in their culture.
So, why are we talking about this? I mean, it's a crazy story, but what does a 500-year-old dancing plague have to tell us today? Well, it turns out quite a lot about the incredible and sometimes scary connection between our minds and our bodies.
And maybe the single most important thing to understand is this, and it's a point made by the historian John Waller. The dancers weren't celebrating, they were suffering. We see this bizarre spectacle and think madness, but what we should probably be seeing is a community in absolute, unbearable agony.
Think about it. In a time when they had no language for therapy or mental health, no way to process their collective trauma, the trauma found its own way out. It just exploded. Physically, the dancing wasn't the problem. It was a symptom of a society that had been pushed far beyond its breaking point. It was the body screaming what the voice could not.
And that really leaves us with a chilling thought to end on, doesn't it? This story is a powerful reminder that when a whole society is under enough stress, our bodies can react in ways we can barely imagine. It really makes you stop and think, if a community's trauma could take physical form like that today, what would it even look like?